Okay, so to start off with this pattern, it is going to be a very, very long process. So we are going to need a lot of patience. You're going to start off with your pieces that make the heart, right? So that's going to be the upper center front, the first middle piece, the second middle piece, and then there's going to be a third piece, which I think I called it the mid side front piece, right? So those pieces make up for the heart. You can choose to make those pieces a different color, or you can choose to put on like how I did like a beaded tulle fabric on top, just to like highlight that heart, to make it pop out. So you can use a different color. If you use a different color, you obviously would need to cut all of these pieces. You need to have two of the pieces, right? You need to have the main piece, and then you need to have the lining piece under it for each piece, right? But if you're gonna be putting on, is it an overlay? Let's just say an overlay. If you're gonna be putting on an overlay, you will need to cut an extra set for the overlay, right? So yeah, so that's how we're gonna start off the piece. What I'm doing is I'm taking, because I'm putting it on the tulle, the beaded tulle, I'm going to sew it onto the front facing fabric. I'm going to hand sew it onto it so that it stays in place before actually stitching everything. But if you are not doing this part and you've chosen to maybe use like just a red fabric just for the hearts to come out, then you wouldn't need to do this part. So after I've stitched everything, so now it's going to act as like basically one piece, which is going to be the front facing piece with the overlay, with the beaded tulle on top, right? So here are all of my pieces. These pieces make for the heart. I was looking at my phone to kind of understand which piece is which, because it is a lot of moving pieces. Like, it is a lot of moving pieces. So what I do now is I'm going to now take the center front pieces, the upper center front piece and the lower center front piece, and I'm going to put them right sides together, right? Okay, not yet. I'm going to take out all my pieces. So basically at this point, I was just like placing my pieces together to know which piece is which and what goes with what. So I'm just putting my upper pieces with my lower pieces, right? Because remember, like on the front of the top, everything has been cut in half, like horizontally. So you have an upper piece, you have a lower piece, then next to that you have your first middle piece, you're gonna have an upper piece, you have a lower piece. So that's just what I'm doing. I'm just laying everything out so that it makes sense for me when I start working on this next part. Alrighty, you guys, so now I take the center front pieces. I have the upper center front piece and I have the lower center front piece. I'm sorry if I want to be confusing my pieces a little, because it is a lot of pieces. Like it's so many pieces. So I'm taking the upper center front piece with the lower center front piece, and I'm going to stitch them together, right? Whereby I'm just laying the upper seam of the lower piece on top of the lower seam of the upper piece, basically like that, like in the video. And this is really important. You need to respect the seam allowance that has been given for these pieces, which is half an inch. The reason why we need to respect the seam allowance is because if we are off even by 1 millimeter, our heart is going to come out wonky. It's going to come out misaligned. And that's not what we want, because it's a couture piece, we're trying a little couture. So you want to respect the seam allowance here. So what I'm doing is I'm just stitching the upper piece and the lower piece. I'm stitching them together. I'm going to do this for all the pieces that you see on the screen right now. I'm going to move on from this. I'm going to do the other center front pieces, then I'm going to move on to my side pieces. Alrighty then, so this piece is a bit complicated. What you're gonna do here is, this is your final side front pieces, right? You're gonna start with, there's one side front piece, which is the upper piece. That's the one that I'm stitching onto the mid side front piece, right? So you're going to stitch that one onto it, match the notches. Then when you're done with that, you're gonna go ahead and stitch the lower side front piece onto these two pieces that you already stitched, right? So everything should have a notch, everything will have a notch, so make sure that you are using those notches to match everything up. So at the end of you like hand stitching these pieces, the reason why I was hand stitching the pieces is, like I said, I want to make sure that I am respecting the seam allowance, and I don't want to go to my sewing machine and start stitching assuming that everything's going to be fine, because then if I'm off by even a millimeter, like I said, I'll have to like redo the entire stitch, and I don't want that because this entire pattern is already quite complex and quite tedious, and we don't want that. So when I'm done stitching everything by hand, I'm gonna go ahead and use my sewing machine, right? So what you want to have is, you want to, at the end of this process, you want to have panels. You want to have a center front panel, then you want to have another panel which would be the first middle mid front panel, then you want to have your second mid front panel, then you want to have your side front panels. So they should be a total of 8 panels. This is inclusive of both sides. Yeah, so that's what you want for this process. Okay, so now I have my panels and I am gonna continue hand stitching, right? Because the reason why I'm hand stitching, like I said, we need to respect that seam allowance. If we're off even by a little bit, we are going to be in trouble. So you see me right now in the video, I'm hand stitching everything, and I want to make sure that before I actually stitch, I want to make sure that all the seams, especially the lower tip of that heart, so this is the center front pieces that we're putting together. These make up like the lower tip of the heart, that little triangle at the tip of the heart. Yeah, that's what we're making. So I want to make sure that I'm using like on the dot half an inch, right? So that when you open up the heart, it does make a nice crisp triangle. The reason why I used the hammer was because I wanted to break the little beads. So a tip is when you are stitching, when you are working with a fabric that's got beading, you are going to want to get rid of some of the beads, especially where there is your seam allowance. So you see me using a hammer just to take that out, to get rid of those beads. I did do this earlier, but as I was stitching, I noticed that I did not take out enough beads on the side seams, right? So here I go and I stitch in the center front pieces, right? Okay, so now I was noticing that as I was stitching, I was struggling a lot with some of those beads, hey, and they were making it impossible for me to stitch it on my sewing machine. So I had to get rid of more beads and more beads and more beads. So you want to make sure that you are, when you are like getting rid of the beading around your seam allowance, you want to make sure you get rid of the beading, like instead of getting rid of the beading at a half an inch border, make sure you're getting rid of it at least 1 inch, because as you're feeding it into your sewing machine, the foot is going to get caught in some of those beads, right? Even though they're not in your seam allowance, but because they're around the seam allowance, it is going to kind of clog up your sewing machine to where the foot is going to like get stuck and then it's not going to move forward, right? So yeah. Alrighty, so now I'm done with this piece, and as I open it up, you'll notice that, like I said, that little triangle at the tip came out crisp, and this is exactly what you want. That's why it's really, really important for you to, like I said, I think I've said it so many times already, like just follow the seam allowance. Like this is one of those projects where we can't even afford to mess up the seam allowance. Like when you get to the back pieces, yeah, you might not 100% follow the seam allowance. Maybe you might just be 1 millimeter off. It's not gonna matter because all the fabric matches, so you won't be able to see any misalignments. But here we can't do that. So what I do is now I take the center front piece that I've made, and I'm going to be attaching the first side piece, my first side piece, the first mid side piece, whatever I called it. Yeah, sorry guys, whatever I called it, that piece, we're gonna put that piece in. Remember, there are notches on all of your pieces, so just follow the notches. Okay, so the reason why as soon as I'm done stitching, I am opening the piece up to check, like, is it aligned? Is it aligned? Is this heart making a smooth line? And if you keep checking and you notice that, okay, this is not making a smooth line and like it's a bit misaligned, and you've already done the stitch with your sewing machine, you are going to have to undo it and redo it again so that everything is aligned, because that detail of the heart is not gonna look nice if it's not aligned, you know. So yeah. Other things I forgot to mention when I started the video, because I just wanted to get straight into explaining everything. The fabric that I'm using, I honestly don't know what the name of the fabric is, but it is this fabric that is like iridescent, I don't know, but like it has this beautiful reflection on it. Alrighty, you guys, so when I get to this part, right, I'm gonna now attach my mesh, my mesh panel. So the mesh that I'm using here is not actually mesh, it's tulle. Okay, I'm using like a strong tulle. I'm using a strong tulle, and it has glitter on it because that's the only see-through fabric that I had. So use like a tulle, but if you want to, you can also use the mesh, but the mesh is like super stretchy, so I would recommend using like tulle. And I'm just going to stitch my tulle onto that opening, right, the sweetheart, the opening. The little opening over there. So I'm hand stitching everything in place, and then I am going to do the same thing. I'm only using one piece because I have two. You need to cut two pieces for your tube, right? For that panel, for that mesh panel, that see-through panel, you need to have two pieces. So the first one is going to be stitched directly onto the front facing fabric, which is the piece where the heart is going to be on, the side where the heart is going to be on, and then the other one is going to be stitched onto the lining. Yeah, so go ahead and attach that piece. As you can see, I do a lot of like hand stitching here. The light is going in and out because I was relying on natural light, and on this specific day it was very cloudy, rainy, cold, weird, you know. The weather was a bit funny, so that's why you see the light going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And yeah, I wish I filmed this at night so that I could just have like a steady light from the lighting that I do have. But yeah, so just stitch on your mesh panel, stitch it on, and then we are going to, from here we're going to move on to doing our lining pieces. Alrighty, so just as we did with our front facing pieces, we're gonna do the exact same thing with the lining. However, if you don't wanna do this part, a trick that I can recommend to you is when you're done cutting your front facing pieces, you can take the pattern, the actual pattern on the paper, get rid of the seam allowance for the center front. Let's, for example, the center front pieces, right? You have your upper center front and you have your lower center front. Get rid of the seam allowance on the upper edge of the lower piece, get rid of the seam allowance on the lower edge of the upper piece, and then stick them together using like some tape, some glue, whatever. Stick them together and then recut them like that, right? Because remember, it was very important for us to like respect the seam allowance for the front, because that's where everybody's going to see it. So if you're gonna do this and then put yourself through the stress of having to match everything, you don't need to do that unless you want to, you know. So I would highly recommend that you just get rid of the seam allowance like I said, on the upper and the lower edge, and then re-stick everything together, and then cut your lining pieces like that, so that you don't have to go through this process of cutting of stitching all of these pieces like this. That is just a suggestion, you know. So exactly what I did for the front facing pieces, like I said, I'm going to do the same thing, and then I'm going to attach my mesh panel, aka our tools panel. Alrighty then, so now we're gonna take our lining piece and then take our front facing piece. We're gonna put them right sides together, pin them along the upper edge, and then we're just going to stitch those two pieces together, right? And then obviously trim off, the excess seam allowance. Funny story, while I'm still stitching, very funny story, it's not really funny. As I was doing this part, after like putting in my mesh panel ripped a little bit, right? And it was the one in front, and so it has this tiny little hole. But then I was like working on such a strict schedule and I wanted to get this pattern done, so I just decided like, okay, I know it's a bit ripped, but because I do have like 2 layers of mesh, it doesn't really show that much. But I was really sad because it's one of my favorite pieces, and the fact that it has that little imperfection is like, oh gosh, why me? And yeah, I'm sure after you're done with this project and all the work you're gonna put in on this project, you would not want to start over again with a new one. You know what, you'll just accept it as is. But yeah, my mesh has a little bit of a rip in it. It's actually really sad. Yeah, so I stitched those two pieces together. Then I'm gonna trim off the excess seam allowance on the upper edge, especially because you don't want it to be showing too much, because we can see everything that's happening through the mesh. Through the mesh. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I turn the piece right side out, right? Then I'm going to open up the piece, right? Let's cut first. Okay, so for this next part, what I wanted to do was, I wanted to basically have, I don't have the right words to describe this, but I just wanted I'm just grabbing the seam allowance along the edge where I connected my mesh piece. I'm just taking the seam allowance from the front facing and the lining facing the lining piece, and then I'm just like stitching those two seam allowances in place, because when you're moving around, I don't want the piece to be moving to where you could see the inner workings of the piece, because we have the mesh, right, which will kind of like would make the seam allowance move weird, or the seam allowance would peek from the mesh. So what you want to do is you just want to grab those seam allowances and then stitch them together, yeah, so that the mesh is basically in place. That made sense, but yeah, that's what we're doing. Okay, so for this piece, right, for the upper edge of the entire corset piece, there isn't going to be any binding, right? So what I do is over here I'm just trimming off the excess seam allowance, but I'll show you what it is that I do. So I take the lining piece and I put it right sides together with the front facing piece, and then I'm going to stitch along the upper edge, right? So with all the pieces that are upcoming, we're going to be doing this process where we take the lining and the front facing, putting them right sides together, and then stitching along the upper edge. So after I've done that, I'm gonna then basically what I want to do is I'm going to sandwich the original piece in between the two pieces that I've just stitched, and then stitch along that seam, right? So with that piece, you can see that the right side of the front facing is touching the right side of the front facing of the other piece, and then I take the lining and I put it under. So I'm basically making a sandwich to which the already sewn piece is inside the two pieces that we're trying to attach. So you are going to continue this process for all of your pieces up until you get to the center back pieces. Okay, I'm back. Now that I have all my pieces attached, what I want to do is now I'm gonna start working on my center back piece, right? So what you want to do is on the center back seam, you want to fold that seam in by 1/2 inch, and then we're gonna stitch it in place, right? So like over there, I was just showing you how you. Over here, I was trying to see if I would be able to stitch the center back seam without like, you know, to where I could just turn it right side out, but it wouldn't let me. So what I ended up doing is, like I said, I'm just gonna fold it inwards by 1/2 inch. Then I'm gonna press it down with an iron and go ahead and just stitch everything. Yeah, stitch the center back seam. So just fold it in like that. And then, yeah, and then we're gonna stitch it in. So over here, I had pressed it in with an iron, like I said, and then I pinned it in place. And then I'm going to stitch along the center back seam for both of the pieces. I want to stitch about 2 millimeters away. And then now we are gonna go ahead and start working on our boning channels. So basically what you want to do with your boning channels is calculate how wide your boning is. You should be using a boning that's about 0.5 centimeters or 0.6 centimeters or 6 millimeters or 5 millimeters, in other words. And then make sure that from the original seam that you stitched away from that, where your seam allowance, okay, not for the center back because we don't have a seam allowance, but on the center back, we're just gonna go from our original stitch that we made. We want to calculate 6 millimeters, and then we're just going to stitch that to create a boning channel. Then on our other pieces, we want to make sure that we're doing the same thing, but this time we want to be stitching on the side where our seam allowance is. So we're gonna make boning channels for all of the seams that we have. Then when we're done with that, we're gonna start the process of placing in our boning. Okay, and another thing that I always like to do is on your center back seam, you should have two boning channels, right? You want to have one boning channel, which is the first one that you saw me stitch earlier. Then you want to have a second one where you're gonna stitch again wide enough to fit your eyelets. Then you're gonna make another boning channel. So over there you see I have two boning channels. I have one that's on the center, literally on the center back seam. Then we have a little gap for our eyelets. Then we do another boning channel. So over here I am just filing my boning because I want to make sure that when I slip it into my fabric, it doesn't pierce it because maybe it's been cut too sharp. So go ahead and just file everything, and then remember when you're cutting your boning, minus half an inch from the bottom, because we're going to be stitching that, so we don't need all of that. So make your boning half an inch shorter than what you actually need for that channel. Now go ahead and place all your boning. It's going to be quite challenging, especially when you get to the heart area. It's going to be quite challenging because remember we have those seams that we stitched that are in the middle. Yeah, so that's going to be quite a challenge, but yeah, go ahead and place in all of your boning. with the boning in place, we're gonna go ahead and work on, you know, hemming or working on that lower edge of our corset piece. And what I'm doing here is I'm just gonna go ahead and just stitch the lower edge so that my boning does not fall out, and then I'm going to attach my binding. Unfortunately, I lost the footage of me working on the binding, so I would highly recommend just going and searching how to attach binding. After this, we're going to do our binding, then we are going to insert our eyelets. I wasn't able to fully show you guys how to insert my how I inserted my eyelets because I live in an apartment and banging on the table just made too much noise and I had to move everything outside. But you're just gonna go ahead and attach your eyelets, and that will be the end of the tutorial.